What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by no co-host, just me today. And today I'm going to be taking a look at free agency for the New York Giants and previewing not the free agents that they could sign, but the free agents that they could re-sign, their own unrestricted free agents, because the Giants have already started to get to work on this. Today, they re-signed Tommy DeVito on an exclusive free agent rights deal or whatever they call it. So he'll be back with the team on a one-year contract, giving them at least somebody on the roster at the quarterback position. If before they signed Tommy DeVito, they had zero quarterbacks technically on their roster, but re-signing Tommy DeVito at least gives them one as they enter free agency, although we know that's not going to be their quarterback and they're going to try their hardest to find one in free agency. But on top of that, they also re-signed Casey Kreiter. Casey Kreiter has been signing one-year deals with the Giants for several years now. He's our long snapper and a captain on special teams. I think this was a good deal. Many of you, if you've been longtime viewers of the channel, might remember he was on this channel long ago. The first season that he signed with the Giants, we did have him on here for an interview. And Casey Kreiter, former Pro Bowler, really good long snapper, really good teammate in person. And, like I said, we interviewed him. He was a great person. So happy to have him back with the Giants as a captain in 2025 once again. But moving on here, the Giants do have a pretty long list of unrestricted free agents. And I'm going to go through the notable guys and discuss whether or not I think the Giants could, should, or would re-sign them and what those contracts could potentially look like. And the first guy that I want to bring up is Jason Pinnock. So I read recently that the Giants do have an interest in extending Jason Pinnock. Obviously, we know that Pinnock has been the starting safety for the Giants over the last 2 years. He's been a little bit inconsistent. I think that first season under Wink Martindale, he was pretty good. Like, he showed some flashes and demonstrated that he could be the long-term starter. But then this past season with Shane Bowen, a regression. And unfortunate to say, that's kind of the case for almost all of the New York Giants defenders. Deonte Banks suffered a regression under Shane Bowen. So did Bobby Okereke. So did almost everybody in that defense. So how much can we hold that against Pinnock or against Shane Bowen? Well, that's up to you. But I think that Jason Pinnock is a player that the Giants actually will re-sign. I don't think he's going to cost a ton. I think that he's probably going to be underneath $7 million per season. And he's a player that I think the Giants might want to bring back somewhere along a 2 or 3 year deal. He's still pretty young. He knows the system, knows the defense, and has good relationships with all of the defensive backs that he's been a leader among over the last 2 years. So I would keep an eye on Jason Pinnock. I think there's a good chance he does re-sign with the New York Giants. But one player that I don't think is going to re-sign with the New York Giants is wide receiver Darius Slayton. Now, if you missed the episode a couple days ago, Alex and I were talking about Darius Slayton, and I brought up some quotes that he had on a recent podcast with Pat Leonard of the New York Daily News. And during that interview, he pretty much indicated that he's done here. I'll try and going to pull these up on the side and read these quotes for you because what he said pretty much indicated that he's ready to move on. So first and foremost, this is the first quote. Definitely winning and being in an advantageous situation are probably two things that are really important for me right now. Obviously, 5 out of my 6 years with the Giants, we weren't competitive. We didn't make the playoffs. We weren't really close to making the playoffs. And one thing I've learned in my career is you play with guys that have the attitude of, if I go off and I get paid, I sleep great at night. And I have learned over my career that I do want to go off and I do want to get paid. But it weighs on me so heavy just losing every single week. I can't take it. Like, there's no money that's going to make me just go home and be like, well, obviously I'm going to be a little bit more happy in a Hellcat than a Camry, but like my spirit, the core of me cannot take that. So he made it pretty clear and obvious that he wants to be on a team that's ready to win in 2025. And obviously the New York Giants coming off of a 3-14 season, they're not going to be ready to win. And also Slayton said that he and his agents expect to have a lot of interest on the open market, and they plan on speaking to several teams once free agency begins. So all of that combined to say, I don't know, maybe the Giants would be interested in re-signing him, but I don't think that the Giants are going to be atop Darius Slayton's shortlist. Sounds like he knows that he's got a market to get paid in elsewhere, and it sounds like he has other teams that he would prefer to play for because of their winning pedigree. So I think we can pretty much prepare for Darius Slayton to depart. And I think that if the Giants were interested in re-signing him, he'd probably be out of their price tag anyway, because if you're looking at the market for wide receivers in recent years, looking at guys like Gabe Davis, for example, Khalil Shakir, for example, Darius Slayton is probably going to get around $16 million per season. Maybe more, maybe less, somewhere in that range, though. And I don't think that's a number that the New York Giants can realistically afford to pay him, considering the needs that they have at other premium positions like quarterback and cornerback, interior defensive line, and interior offensive line. Those are greater needs for the Giants. They're more expensive positions, and they're harder to find talent at. So I think they're ultimately going to prioritize those spots and allow Darius Slayton to walk in free agency, which, listen, my take on it is this. He's been with the Giants for 6 years. They've been bad with him for 6 years. They're probably going to continue to be bad with or without him. So it just is what it is. And he's ready to move on. And the Giants, they could have re-signed him last offseason. They had an opportunity. He went to them, asked for a pay raise and an extension. They refused to give him what he asked for, and ultimately just gave him a few incentives in his contract that they knew he probably wasn't going to hit and called it a day. So I don't think that the Giants are too interested in re-signing Darius Slayton either. Otherwise, they would have last offseason. So it's the end of somewhat of an era, the Daniel Jones, Darius Slayton era. Half of it had already died midway through last season. The other half is moving out of here this upcoming offseason is my prediction. So Darius Slayton departing. Listen, he led the Giants in 4 of his 6 seasons in receiving and 4 of his 6 seasons with the team, over 720 yards in each of those 4 seasons. He's been a pretty good and consistent playmaker, so the Giants better have a plan on how to replace him. No, he's not a WR1. He's a fringe WR2/WR3. But honestly, for a WR3, he's a really good one. And maybe it's not ideal for him to be WR2, but he can fill that role as well. The Giants don't really have anyone to fill that role. Wan'Dale Robinson coming out of the slot is a decent player. Jalen Hyatt has not proven to be ready to take on that role. Otherwise, he probably would have taken on that role in place of Darius Slayton last season. But then again, maybe it was the issue of the quarterback position holding guys like Hyatt back. Now we'll have to see, do the Giants bring in a premier talent at wide receiver in order to replace Slayton? That will tell us a lot about how they feel about Hyatt. If they don't do that, then they're probably anticipating either to get somebody in the draft or that Jalen Hyatt is going to play a larger role this upcoming season. So we'll see how all of that unfolds. Now, some of the other players that I think we should be keeping an eye on as we enter free agency, Isaiah Simmons. So the reason why I think the Giants might actually extend Isaiah Simmons is locker room reasons. Well, actually, you know what? Joe Schoen has done a pretty bad job at keeping those locker room guys in-house. Nick McLeod, Xavier McKinney, right? There's been a lot of guys who were well-liked in the locker room that he just let go. So maybe they won't re-sign Isaiah Simmons. But my take on why they should is because he's a great locker room player. Doesn't complain much, does what he's told, waits for his opportunity, and makes plays when he gets his opportunity. Best friends with Malik Neighbors, a really good friend with all the defensive backs and linebackers since he plays both of those positions. And I do think that versatility and his athleticism and raw ability to play the game of football, all of those things are valuable to me. And because he barely plays and he's not the best player, he's not going to cost you a whole lot. So I really do think that the Giants should look to re-sign Isaiah Simmons on a cheap one-year deal like they did last offseason. Low cost, high reward move based on the impact that he has behind the scenes and in the locker room. I would like to see Isaiah Simmons brought back. Whether they want to play him at linebacker, nickel, safety, out wide corner, I don't really care. I just think that he's athletic and he's talented. Re-sign him and put him somewhere and let him make some sort of an impact. And he also makes an impact on special teams. So I'm in favor of re-signing Isaiah Simmons on a cheap contract. Another big-time name that I think the Giants have to keep an eye on is Azeez Ojulari. Of course, they had the opportunity to potentially trade him at the trade deadline. They opted not to, and that was a pretty controversial decision. Alex and I got into a heated debate on the channel about that decision. He was in mega favor of moving on from Azeez Ojulari at the deadline. I was against it. I thought that it made sense for the Giants to hold on to him for depth purposes. They still needed to put a competitive team on the field. They still failed to do that, but they needed to try. Plus, I wanted the opportunity to try and extend Azeez Ojulari this offseason. Giants will have first dibs at him because they kept him now. And from what I've read, he's probably not going to get the most robust market in free agency. He's had a lot of injuries and he's been very inconsistent. And for those reasons, I think the most likely landing spot for him in free agency is the New York Giants. He's not going to reach past that $10 million per season like all Giants fans got really afraid of midway through the season. He had a few games with a few sacks and he was playing well down the stretch while Kayvon Thibodeau was out, but then he immediately got hurt again, which was always the concern with Azeez Ojulari. So his price tag didn't really increase all that much despite the few games that he played well in, because that's pretty much been the story of his career. Play well for a few games, out of lineup for the next few games, back in the lineup, inconsistent play there, probably back out of the lineup. So that's pretty much been the story for Azeez Ojulari over the last 2 years. And that's why I think at the most, he gets a 2-year contract that pays him around $8 million per season at the most. And for me, the New York Giants, I would go ahead and sign that deal because I think they need depth in this defensive line on the edge in particular. Brian Burns was banged up a lot last year. I don't think he missed any games, but he was playing through Achilles. He was playing through groin. He was playing through, I think, arm and calf at one point. Guy was banged up all year, just kept playing, but you don't want to have to keep those guys on the field when they're injured. You'd like to have some talent behind them, give them some breaks and some pause here and there without sacrificing too much of your on-field talent. So Azeez Ojulari fits that bill. Obviously, Kayvon Thibodeau has dealt with some injuries as well. You want a guy who knows the defensive system, knows the locker room and the environment and culture, who can step in and play for you. And I think Azeez Ojulari does that. Plus, he's still pretty young and, in my opinion, getting better every year. Just needs to get healthy one of these years to have a really big breakout campaign. So Giants fans can't complain about having too many pass rushers, right? The 2007/8 and 2011/12 Super Bowls were won really in those games on the backs of the defensive line. The Giants had a stable of pass rushers. They had a starting two, then they had two starters behind those guys, and they had 4 quality pass rushers every single game. The Giants have Burns. He's great. We don't know what we have in Thibodeau, and behind those guys is nothing unless we re-sign Azeez Ojulari. Yes, on the defensive interior, we have Dexter Lawrence, but behind him, we don't have much either. So depth overall is an issue for the Giants. So these decent depth players that they have, like Azeez Ojulari, I would like to see them re-sign. So that's just me kind of walking you through my logic here on why I think Ojulari should be re-signed by the Giants and why I think ultimately he will be. I don't think he's going to have a big market, and I don't think he's going to get paid big time from another team. So I think that Azeez Ojulari absolutely should re-sign with the New York Giants. Now, a couple other players that I want to mention, I think these guys are a little bit less likely to re-sign, or if they do, it won't be immediately. It will be down the line. Number one being Adoree Jackson. I don't think he comes back to the Giants this year. He almost didn't come back to the Giants last year. He went through the entirety of free agency. The two parties didn't have any interest in each other, the Giants and Jackson. All the way, right near the end of training camp, they were like, okay, you know what? Our cornerbacks so far at practice and preseason, they suck. So now we're going to have to sign somebody. And then they came crawling back to Adoree Jackson. I don't know if that's going to happen because I don't know if Adoree Jackson is going to want to go through this again. Plus, I'm expecting the Giants to spend big at cornerback this offseason, therefore negating their need to have Adoree Jackson on the roster. So yes, he is a good locker room presence. He's a good leader, and he knows the team. He knows the scheme. All of those things are true, and I do like Adoree Jackson, and I miss the player that he was 2 years ago, but he's no longer that player from 2 years ago. And the Giants don't need the player that he is now. They need a legitimate upgrade at cornerback. When we talk about veteran experience, yes, they need that. Adoree Jackson is that, but they need a legitimate starter. I expect them to shop heavy at the top of the market for a DJ Reed, Travarius Ward, or Jair Alexander, or Byron Murphy. One of those guys is going to be the guy that the Giants sign, I think, unless all of them say no. Then maybe they do come crawling back to Adoree Jackson. However, I don't think that's going to happen. They're going to pay their fair share of cap space over to one of those top cornerbacks on the market and move on from Adoree Jackson, in my opinion. And then the next guy that I want to bring up here, this is really the last notable free agent. Maybe I'll go through and read out all of them for you. Well, actually, 2 guys. So I'll get this one over quickly. Gunnar Olszewski, the punt returner / kick returner, and Ihmir Smith-Marsette, the punt returner / kick returner, the 2 return specialists for the Giants last year. I think one of those guys gets re-signed, the other one walks. Gunnar Olszewski, I think, is a former All-Pro or Pro Bowler, but he was the injured one this past season. It was Ihmir Smith-Marsette that stepped in and played in his place and returned a punt or a kick, whichever one it was, I don't remember, for a touchdown in that terribly painful victory over the Colts in Week 17 that cost us the number 1 pick. I think he won the job with that play and a few of the other returns that he had down the stretch of the season. So I do think Ihmir Smith-Marsette gets re-signed. I'm not sold that Gunnar Olszewski gets re-signed. Now, the last guy that I want to talk about is Greg Van Roten, the guy who started every game for the Giants last year. He's the only offensive lineman to have appeared in all 17 games for the Giants in 2024. All of the rest of them, Andrew Thomas, John Runyon, John Michael Schmitz, Jermaine Illuminor, and Evan Neal, all of those guys missed time at one point or another due to injuries. So I think that Greg Van Roten, at 34 years old, he's going to be cheap once again. He proved that he's reliable, he's consistent, and he's durable, and he's still playing at a decently high level for a 34-year-old. I think the Giants should absolutely re-sign him. However, he should not be their starting right guard in 2025. They should re-sign him to be a backup who fills in at any of those positions on the offensive line, because that's what he did last year. He played some right guard, he played some center, he has the ability to play some left guard. Sign him to just be your backup interior offensive lineman and fill 3 positions in a backup role with Greg Van Roten. I think the Giants actually should prioritize getting him under contract as their backup offensive lineman early in the offseason period rather than waiting until the end of the free agency period to then sign him. I think that he should actually be a priority because depth is really important. And I feel like the Giants don't treat it importantly enough, unfortunate as that may be. I still expect them to spend big at right guard. That's why I only think that Greg Van Roten is going to be a depth piece. I think they're going to go out there and sign a legitimate starter at about $10 million per season, and then they're going to go ahead and bring Greg Van Roten back on a cheaper deal as the backup, and that's what I think should happen. So hopefully I'm right about that because I think that's the right path forward. Now, some of the other names who are hitting free agency that I don't think are priority extension players for the Giants include Matthew Adams, the linebacker, quarterback Tim Boyle, punter Jamie Gillen. I think the Giants can probably afford to upgrade at punter, but seems like they like Jamie Gillen, so maybe he gets extended. Tackle Chris Hubbard. He didn't play well for the team last year. Linebacker Patrick Johnson. I can't even lie and say that I know who that is. Quarterback Drew Lock. He's definitely on his way out of here. Tight end Chris Manhertz. I could see him coming back. Like we said, Azeez Ojulari, Gunnar Olszewski, and Jason Pinnock. Defensive back Elijah Riley, whatever. Isaiah Simmons, Darius Slayton, Amir Smith-Marset. We talked about those guys. Aaron Stinney is a backup guard that I think the Giants could maybe re-sign later in the offseason. Not a priority. Greg Stroman Jr., the cornerback that they signed late last year as a backup. Again, I think they're going to spend big. Maybe they come back to him for depth. Unlikely, though. Linebacker Ty Summers, Greg Van Roten, who we discussed, and defensive lineman Armin Watts. Those are all of the New York Giants unrestricted free agents as free agency kicks off soon. Their exclusive rights free agents include Tommy DeVito, who, again, I said they extended this morning, Tom and Fox, who I could see them bringing back, Deontay Johnson, who I definitely think they'll bring back, and Devad Wilson, who I can't tell you. I know who that is, a cornerback, apparently. So those are all of them. Starting on March 3rd, March 10th is the legal tampering period at noon. So Monday morning, expect any trades, the trade for the number 1 pick that may or may not happen, a trade for Jair Alexander that may or may not happen, whatever. The Giants are going to try and work through the weekend to get these deals done ASAP, and very likely will have them done prior to Monday because at the start of the legal tampering period is when they're going to want to talk to all these different quarterbacks and players that they're interested in signing and get those deals done right away. So that's what I would expect Monday. Expect a flurry of signings. Expect the Giants to land their quarterback on Monday morning. It's going to be a lot of fun. Now, any salary cap saving moves that they could make will probably break down in the coming days. Of course, they have a lot of contracts that they can restructure, including that of Brian Burns, Dexter Lawrence, and Andrew Thomas. We'll see what they do with Bobby Okereke. We'll see what they do with John Runyon, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Jermaine Illuminor, some other guys that are potentially up for extension or restructurings. But I will say one player that I think could get cut before Monday is Rakeem Nunez-Roches, defensive tackle. Yes, the Giants are thin on the defensive line. They're thin because Rakeem Nunez-Roches, Nacho, has not played well enough, and cutting him would save them $3.6 million. So keep an eye on that potential move this offseason. But that's pretty much going to wrap this one up. Listen, I just wanted to go ahead and break down all the Giants' unrestricted free agents and give you my take on who they could, should, or would re-sign. And that's pretty much what I accomplished. Keep an eye out for an upcoming upload. I believe tomorrow, probably tomorrow, I'm going to try my hardest to push this out. It's going to be our blueprints for the offseason, mine and Alex's. Man, I busted my ass. Go check out my written version of it on empiresportsmedia.com if you would like. It's 3,500 words. It's as comprehensive of a breakdown and a step-by-step plan to go through the offseason as you're going to find, and I promise you that. Really worked hard on that one, so go check that out. New York Giants 2025 offseason blueprint. Then again, we're going to be making videos for those and presenting those on the channel by tomorrow, hopefully Saturday morning, the absolute latest. We're going to get those out to you guys who I know it's something that all of you were requesting and really wanted to see. Long breakdowns of what we would do to fix the Giants play-by-play. Well, we're working on it, and we're going to get that delivered to you this weekend. I'm really excited to do that, and I'm really excited to keep talking about all of the Giants storylines throughout the offseason. It's going to be a really fun one, and like I said, Monday morning, it's going to be hectic. Expect to hear a lot from Fireside Giants in the coming days throughout free agency. So catch you all on the next one. Well, actually, make sure you leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. Comment your thoughts down below. Check us out on Apple and Spotify, and leave us a 5-star review. And go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, I'll catch you all on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.